A Karen PE teacher tried to force me, a 15-year-old amputee with a prosthetic leg, to run laps without the proper equipment. When I refused, she tried to physically drag me onto the field, and I slapped her in defense. Here's what happened next, and how justice was served. So, I'm a 15-year-old dude living in Texas, and I have a prosthetic leg. When I was 12, I lost my leg in a car accident, and it's been a wild ride ever since. I've had to learn how to walk again, and even now, things like stairs and uneven ground can be a real pain. But I'm pretty stubborn, so I make do. One of the coolest things I've learned since getting my prosthetic is that I can actually run with it. But there's a catch. I need a specific type of prosthetic for running, which I haven't been able to afford yet. My current leg works fine for everyday stuff, but it's not built for the impact of running laps or anything like that. Anyway, that brings us to the story. It's a sunny Texas afternoon, and I'm hanging out on the bleachers at my school's track, watching my buddies on the track team practice. I'm not on the team, but I like to support them, you know? Enter Karen, our school's PE teacher. She's got the haircut and everything, and she's notorious for being a pain. She's been on my case ever since I transferred here a few months ago, and I've been avoiding her as best as I can. But today, she spots me sitting on the bleachers, and I swear I see her eyes light up like she's just found her next victim. She stomps over to me, her clipboard clutched in her hand, and I can already tell she's got something up her sleeve. Karen speaks in a demeaning tone. Well, if it isn't our little bench warmer, what are you doing here, watching everyone else do the hard work? Just supporting my friends, ma'am. What about you? She then replies, well, that's sweet, but I think it's about time you got off your butt and joined them. You're not exempt from physical activity just because you have a prosthetic leg. Now, I'm all for pushing my limits, but I know my body, and I know I can't run laps without the right prosthetic. So, I try to explain it to her. I understand, ma'am, but I can't run like this. I need a specific prosthetic for running, and I don't have it yet. She looks me up and down, and I can tell she doesn't believe me. I brace myself for the incoming storm. That sounds like a convenient excuse. You need to learn to push yourself and stop hiding behind your disability. Now get up and run some laps. At this point, I've had enough of her nonsense. I decide to stand my ground. Hell no! I told you I can't run without the right prosthetic! You're seriously risking my safety here! Karen, now fuming, tries to grab my arm and pull me onto the field, but I snatch it away from her grasp. I scream, back the hell off! In my anger and desperation, I slap her across the face. The entire field goes silent, and everyone's eyes are on us. Karen, now holding her cheek, looks furious and shocked at the same time. She storms off, saying she's going to get the principal involved. My friends gather around me, asking if I'm okay and reassuring me that I was in the right. Soon enough, the principal shows up, and he's got Karen in tow. He asks for my side of the story, and I explain everything that happened, including the part where I slapped her. My friends back me up, and the principal listens carefully. I understand that you were frustrated and felt threatened, but violence is not the answer. However, I will investigate the situation further and make sure appropriate action is taken. I go home that day, still shaken from the whole ordeal. I tell my parents everything, and they're livid. They promise to support me and make sure Karen faces consequences for her actions. The next day, my parents and I go to the school to meet with the principal. My dad, who's a lawyer, mentions that we could take legal action against the school and Karen for endangering my safety. The principal, now realizing the gravity of the situation, promises to handle it promptly. Within a day, Karen is fired from her position as PE teacher, and the school makes a public apology to me and my family. I mean, seriously, trying to force you to run laps without the proper equipment? Talk about reckless. And when you tried to explain it to her, she just wouldn't listen. But wait, it gets even crazier. She actually tried to physically drag you onto the field? No wonder you slapped her in defense. I mean, I don't condone violence, but you were totally cornered there. Props to your friends for having your back and your parents for stepping in and making sure Karen faced the consequences of her actions. I'm so glad justice was served, and you're safe now. This next story is titled, I do not care if you have cancer, my child deserves your seat. Yeah, so this encounter happened about 7 months ago. A little backstory. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with a cancer of the nasal cavity, stage 2. The tumor was quite large, but thankfully benign. Edit. People have pointed out I formulated this wrong. By benign, I wanted to shorten the fact it still did not spread into other tissue, thus it was still contained, which is what I thought the word meant. I apologize for my gaps in knowledge. To get it removed, I first had to undergo aggressive chemotherapy to make it smaller. Thanks to the chemo, I had severe alopecia, hair loss, which made most of my hair, and even eyebrows and eyelashes fall out. At some point I had to go bald, but I wore a wig, because I didn't want to look like a skinhead neo-Nazi. I'm 6'4" and pretty muscular, so I thought people would assume. So once, after a long chemo session in the hospital, I took the bus home. There's only one bus that goes from the hospital to where I live, so I took that one only to see it was absolutely packed. I felt like shit thanks to the chemo, so I asked a middle-aged dude to let me sit. He was very understanding and gave me his spot without complaining. 2 stops later, enter entitled Karen Mother, a lovely whale with an "I demand a parley with the CEO" haircut and a 12-some-year-old kid. It took her roughly 5 seconds to see the bus was packed, start looking for a free seat, spot me, and start marching, or, in her case, trying to fit in the aisle between the seats while shoving others aside, to me. When I saw her, I knew I was screwed. She then stood next to me and decided to talk to me. This is the conversation that followed. "Hey, could you let my kid sit down?" "You mean me?" "I mean who else?" "Oh, I'm sorry, but I'm on my way from the hospital and..." "So are we. My boy just broke his leg and we're coming straight from the ER." Her kid was standing next to her, without any support, clearly embarrassed because he knew she was waffling. "He's standing next to you completely fine. Look here, boy, I am 21, my kid deserves to sit down. Look, madam, I'm sorry, but I just got back from a chemo session in the hospital, and I need to sit down and rest." I then moved my wig a bit to let her see my bald head. The Karen then straight up started yelling in my face, "Stop making excuses and get off the frikin' seat, you frikin' skinhead piece of crap!" At this point, I was baffled. I didn't know what to say. The kid was trying to make his mother stop and we had the attention of the whole bus. She then grabbed me and tried to yank me from my seat. I held on tight and thankfully didn't fall off. Now, enter old grandpa, my savior. He says, "Will you shut the frick up, you dumb clown? Who do you think you're talking to? Stop assaulting other passengers, or I will be forced to step in." Also, every dumb moron could see that the dude has cancer. No, he's just a frickin' baldy. He's got no eyebrows, you twat. Seems like that really offended Karen, because she spun around on the spot and threw a falcon punch in poor old man's face. I was shocked, and in disbelief. The whole bus was flabbergasted, and the kid probably wished he'd never been born. The old man then said something unbelievable, and a golden sweet karma moment followed. Okay, that does it. Harassing passengers on the bus, physical assault against a passenger, and now assaulting an officer. You're in deep trouble, lady. The man then pulled out a badge and told her to stay where she was. Then he pulled out his phone, called someone, and told her she was being arrested. I couldn't believe it. Old man was a bloody cop. At this point, Karen was as white as a wall. The bus had just come to a stop, so she decided she'd make a run for it, but other passengers blocked her way. She then also got charged with resisting arrest thanks to this. 3 stops later, a police car was waiting for the Karen and the kid. The kid told me he was sorry for his mother's behavior, and I felt really sorry for the kid. He wasn't a bad child, but his mother was a hellspawn. The old man then talked to me and asked me if I wanted to press charges, to which I gladly said yes, took a statement, and thankfully was kind enough to let me solve everything on the phone, so I didn't have to come to the police station for questioning. In the end, Karen got some jail time, I think it was a few months, and some community service. I, in return, got a good story to tell and the sweet taste of instant karma. Right now, I'm riding the same bus home, as I just got back home from the hospital after a checkup, which reminded me of this. A friend, who's sitting next to me, told me I should post it here. He, as much as myself, also couldn't believe that such people exist, but it seems I proved it to him. I should also note that the surgery went well, I was declared cancer-free in November and my hair is slowly returning. Also, I don't need to wear a wig anymore. Wow, what a terrible encounter you had on the bus. I can't believe that Karen would be so inconsiderate and rude to you, especially given your situation. It's awful that she would physically assault you and the old man just because she wanted her kid to sit down. I'm glad that the old man turned out to be a cop and was able to take care of the situation. You didn't deserve to be treated like that, and I hope that Karen learned her lesson and is more considerate of others in the future. Entitled parents, who are my bosses, demand me to work while my doctor tells me to be on bed rest. While I'm pregnant, they say their vacation is more important than my doctor's orders. Here's what happened. This happened 8 years ago, when I was pregnant with my oldest child. The entitled parents in this story are mine. At the time, they were also my employers. My husband accepted his dream internship in another state between his junior and senior years of college, and didn't want to leave me alone with a complicated rainbow pregnancy. We had previously miscarried while temporarily staying with my parents the summer before. That's important later. I was about 5 months along when his internship started, and I had already had several ER trips and major complications due to HG. That's the kind of morning sickness that lasts all day every day for the entire pregnancy, as in, non-stop puking resulting in extreme weight loss and severe dehydration. There were times simply looking at a certain food or shifting my position in my seat caused me to throw up uncontrollably. If you know, you know. It sucks. For various reasons, me going with my husband wasn't an option, but I couldn't be left alone with my condition. After exploring several options, the only viable one was for me to move in with my parents during the summer until he finished the internship, which was also when my due date was. Then we would both move back to where the university was, about 5 hours from my parents, in order for him to finish his final year. Looking back, I still don't know why we ever thought it would be a good idea. At the time, I would have described my parents as overbearing and self-centered, but 8 years later I can confidently say they are toxic narcs with undiagnosed personality disorders. Living with them was a nightmare, but it was only temporary, and I figured staying with someone who could help me get to my appointments or drive me to the ER was best for my baby. My parents owned a small construction company, and I had previously worked on and off in the front office doing administrative assistant work for several years. Everything from running payroll to filing reports with the state, picking up, delivering plans and materials, paying bills, sending bills, managing the schedules, keeping the books balanced, and keeping the entire office organized. All of these tasks were combined into a single underpaid position that they could never seem to keep filled. Gee, I wonder why. It was how I made money during the summers and between semesters at college, but I hated it. I knew how to do all these things, because when I was 16, I helped my parents as they started the company by themselves, and my dad was the only laborer. Whenever they were left short-handed, the manipulation and guilt would pull me back to help them temporarily until they could get someone competent and loyal to fill the position. When this story took place, the company had been running for nearly 8 years and had about 12 employees, almost all of them laborers and somehow related to us, because relatives are the easiest to exploit in underpaid jobs, right? And they still only had one person doing all the office work. If they didn't have an employee filling that position, it would fall to my mom, and she never wanted to do any of this in the first place. The company was my dad's idea, so they wanted to keep her out of the office as much as possible. I could probably fill an entire subreddit with stories of how they exploited and stole from family members and employees in this company. The timing of when I moved in with my parents happened to coincide with when their most recent assistant quit, and also when I had just found a medication that made my constant nausea manageable. They needed someone to fill the position, and I offered to help out for a couple of months so that they could find the right person and actually spend more than a couple of days training them before expecting them to be able to handle everything properly. The idea was that by the time I had my baby at the end of the summer, the permanent replacement would be fully trained and up to speed on everything. Also, I could make a little bonus money to help cover costs of having my first baby, so it seemed like a win-win, even if I hated the job. To make a long story short, my parents procrastinated finding a permanent employee to fill the position, making it impossible for me to take a step back from work as my pregnancy progressed. Additionally, at home they treated me like a teenager, I was 24, and gave me a chore list, and certain nights of the week I was expected to prepare dinner. They weren't charging me rent, so I figured I shouldn't complain. They also snapped at me for the amount of food I ate. I helped buy groceries. Also, I was pregnant and trying to recover from spending the last 5 months of not being able to keep food down. The worst was that they felt entitled to give me all the unsolicited parenting and pregnancy advice, including anti-vax and pseudoscience arguments, and my dad even demanded that I let him touch my stomach to feel the baby move. I was overstressed with being surrounded by my toxic parents at both work and at home on top of trying to keep my baby healthy and missing my husband. I became horribly depressed and started having really bad PTSD from my miscarriage that had happened almost exactly a year prior in the exact same place. Within 4 weeks of moving in with them, I started having preterm labor problems and was in a considerable amount of pain. I was instructed by my doctor to be on work rest and had to get progesterone shots regularly, but because my parents didn't have anyone else to run the office yet, they bullied me into continuing my work, but just doing it remotely from home. They made it clear that they still expected me to pull my weight at home with chores and meals, and that once my doctor cleared me to go back to work, that I was needed back in the office. I felt trapped because I had nowhere else to go, and the guilt was overwhelming because whenever they were home they constantly talked about all the problems happening at work, because I wasn't there to run the office. My health problems continued, and after 2 more weeks they decided they had better actually advertise the position and start looking for a permanent replacement. All of this was leading up to a 10-day vacation to New York They had been planning for themselves. The week before they left for their vacation, my doctor told me I had to be on bed rest, and if my family wouldn't respect that, I would need to find a new place to live. He has been my doctor for years and understands all the details of the situation. So after my appointment, I called my dad to let him know that I was putting my foot down and refusing to work at all anymore at the office or at home, as per my doctor's orders. But when he answered the phone, he says, "OP, guess what? We went through all the applications from last week and found one we like. We interviewed her and she'll be starting on Friday. So we need you to prepare some instructional documents for her to reference for once you have the baby, and we need you to come in and train her during the next week while we are gone. When we get back from our vacation, you can be done working." He said all this like I should be excited that they didn't even post the position until 6 weeks after I started working, and that they were just now getting around to hiring someone. Like I should be glad I was finally getting to stop working almost a month after my doctor told me to stop. I took a deep breath and explained that I couldn't work anymore and that I couldn't come in and train her, that I was sorry, but I couldn't help them anymore. He got really agitated and started telling me I was putting them in an impossible situation because they need to go on their vacation and couldn't train the replacement. And he didn't understand why I couldn't just push through the next week until they got back. I suggested that when she came in on Friday, they train her themselves on the most basic things that needed to be done, still catch their flight the next day as planned, and just put any tasks that needed absolute accuracy on hold until they returned. He answered that they couldn't possibly do any training on Friday because we need to pack for our vacation. We've been planning this trip for months, and if we have to train her, we won't be ready for it. Basically, I needed to go in and do it. I'm frustrated at this point. I've been ordered to be on bed rest. To which he replies, "Well, what does that mean?" So I say that I need to be in bed, and because he's such an understanding and caring father, he replies, "Okay, we can make that work. I'll put a cot in the office and you can lay down on it while you explain things and train her." And that was the last straw. I told him I would be spending the night at my sister-in-law's house and hung up the phone. She had driven me to the doctor's office and was still with me, and when I told her what my dad said, she immediately offered to take me in and let me live with her until my husband finished his internship, knowing full well that it meant I would be having the baby while staying with her, and that she and her family would be helping me care for a newborn. She's an angel, and I don't know how I would have survived this without her. My husband got permission to work remotely for the next week and drove back home that night and moved me into my sister's house. She and her family cared for me and actually let me be on bed rest. They set up a room for me and make everything as accommodating as possible and never asked for anything in return. I 100% believe the only reason my baby was born at a healthy gestation age is because of their care to bring my stress down and keep me well fed. My parents were furious and accused me of lying to them and stabbing them in the back. They went on my social media and left comments about how hateful I am to those who have sacrificed the most for me and how horrible and selfish I am. On the day they came home from their vacation, yes, they still went. No, I don't know how they made it work. I was in the hospital with more complications and trying really hard not to have my baby early. The hospital is a couple minutes from the airport, and my sister called my mom as soon as their flight landed to just let her know we were there, so that if something happened with me or the baby, they couldn't claim I maliciously withheld information as more reason to hate on me. But apparently my mom thought this was an invitation to care about me, and she immediately shut it down. She says, "Well, I'm sorry, but we've been gone for the last 10 days with an undertrained employee in the front office, and there are things I need to take care of that can't wait," and she hung up. When I actually did have my baby a few weeks later, they didn't come to the hospital because we have too much work at the office. You know, priorities. Needless to say, I've since cut them out of my life. Pregnancy is already tough as it is, but to have to deal with entitled parents on top of it, that's just cruel. Reading the OP's story, it's clear to me that they were put through an incredibly difficult and unfair situation. Being mistreated and taken advantage of by one's own parents during such a vulnerable time is truly heartbreaking. Also, I hate to say it, but they would have probably gaslighted, say, if you did ignore the doctor's orders and you lost the baby, they would probably say, well, it's your fault that you didn't take the doctor's orders. They would probably blame you for it, even though they demanded that you serve them. Hopefully, they haven't tried to demand grandparents' rights. Anyways, if you like this video, you might like this video on the left, where a Karen calls cops on black neighbor for moving out, says he's a thief. Yeah, this is too far.